Back in the 90s, when getting jiggy with it was a socially acceptable pastime, real-time strategy games were the bread and butter of the PC gaming market. It takes a particular sort of brain to be able to balance resource management, capturing control points, and building an effective military force, and PC gamers are just the sort of obsessive-compulsive control freaks to take pleasure in these sadomasochistic bore fests.
87% of the people who play real-time strategy games go into corporate management where they can more effectively put their micromanaging superpowers to good use. The remaining 13% is made up of accountants and sexually unfulfilled college dropouts. 100% of these people are Korean.
Far from complicated then is this entry into the real-time strategy canon. Yes, from the people who brought you tiny people playing soccer and tiny people playing golf, it's tiny people shooting one another, better known as cannon fodder. The game has you using the mouse to control a squad of teeny-weeny ickle soldiers as you complete a number of varied mission objectives, such as wiping out the opposing forces, or killing all of the enemies, or destroying all enemy soldiers. Completing a mission earns you additional recruits, and when you run out of recruits, it's game over. The game was released on almost every major system of the time, including the Amiga, the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar, even the more obscure systems like the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo got in on the action.
It's a refreshingly uncomplicated game with a very simple control scheme, which is probably why it translated so well to consoles. It's also unashamedly anti-war, giving every one of your little soldiers their own names, commending their achievements, but importantly, commemorating their demise. You grow attached to these little guys. You want them to stay with you right to the very end, and when they die, you feel a deep loss, a profound sense of sadness that stays with you long after you've finished the game. You know, unless you're a heartless bastard, like me.
But in late 2000, cannon fodder reappeared in an entirely unexpected place.
Because it came out for the Game Boy Color, and most people... never mind.
No, really, this is the Game Boy Color version. Published by Codemasters and supposedly cranked out in less than 6 months, the developers managed to get the system to do some remarkable things, like this FMV intro, a pre-rendered 3D menu screen, and some rather impressive audio.
I see them! Help! Help!
Seeing the Game Boy Color pull off full motion video and some fairly decent audio is something quite special, though it's easy to forget just how special it is if you choose to play the game on a Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy Player. In fact, playing the game on anything other than an actual Game Boy Color adds an eardrum-piercing buzz, like someone sticking a slide whistle in your ear and blowing on it till your cochlea ruptures and your skull fills with blood.
Unfortunately, the rest of the transition was less than successful. The developers had to change rather a lot to accommodate the tiny handheld, and many of the changes take away from what originally made war so much fun. The biggest change is the squad size. In the original, your squad could have as many as 5 soldiers, and if they all get killed, you have to restart the level. In the Game Boy Color version, the squad cap is reduced to 2, and when they inevitably get shot in the face, another squad simply parachutes in, allowing you to continue where you left off.
This sounds useful, and it would be if this version of the game weren't so ball-bustingly difficult. The enemy are extremely precise shots, able to pick off your men with ease, and you'll often find yourself being taken out of the same spot by the same little bastard again and again and again, until you just want to throw your Game Boy across the room in frustration.
This means you can quite easily go through 5 or 6 soldiers in the space of one level, sometimes even a dozen or 2 on harder stages or boss battles. When you only have so many recruits on standby, a particularly difficult level can have you eating through them faster than being unemployed eats away at my self-esteem. The presentation, technically impressive though it may be, isn't actually much use. The original game did a fantastic job of displaying information in a simple and easy to read manner, from Boot Hill, the minimalist but informative pre-mission screen, to the straightforward black and white briefings. The Game Boy Color version simply adds too much, first by spreading out all of the useful information across 4 different menu screens, but worst of all by replacing the simple to understand mission brief with a dull, wordy narrative provided by the annoyingly named Major Sterling.
It'd be like IKEA throwing out their simple assembly instructions and asking Tolkien to write them instead. Only with, fewer hobbits.
A lot of these design decisions stand in the way of the Game Boy Color version being a great port of an exceptional game, especially when the original version's simple presentation would have lent itself well to the handheld format. All of this is compounded by the addition of inconceivably bonkers difficult boss fights.
The boss fights are harder than a balloon fetishist at a party supply store, and they stop the game dead. Even your average scrolling shoot-'em-up enthusiast would have a hard time getting past the shot pattern of this sadistic pixelante. He's almost impossible to kill.
Almost impossible, that is, unless you have a sufficiently high number of recruits on standby, waiting to serve as cannon fodder.
Oh, I just got that.
It's stuff like this that makes this version of the game so thoroughly despicable, which is a shame because it's really quite charming on the surface.
The voice acting and the brightly coloured graphics really are a treat, but on the whole the Game Boy Color version is just poorly balanced. There's almost no difficulty curve to speak of. I'm a 26-year-old man and I barely made it partway through the game. Imagine how the Game Boy Color's key demographic of 10-year-old Pokemon enthusiasts would have handled this game. It's technically impressive, but sadly that doesn't make up for the game's shortcomings. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Well, I love this job.